So Paul Manafort, let's talk about Paul Manafort. He has been linked to controversial Republican operative Roger Stone for decades. The two helped form a lobbying firm to assist with Ronald Reagan's presidential run in 1980.
The firm would go on to work for the RNC and a handful of other GOP candidates, or campaigns rather. So here's how their efforts were described in the recent Netflix documentary, Get Me Roger Stone.
Black Manafort and Stone, in their brazenness, really created the modern sleazeball lobbyist.
They elected people. As soon as those people were in office, they turned around and lobbied them. And so they crossed a line that hadn't been crossed. Washington's been worse for it ever since.
Paul Manafort of Black, Manafort, Stone, and Kelly stands with his partners at the receiving end of $31 million in subsidies.
I will stipulate for purposes of today that you could characterize this as influence peddling.
Thank you.
To discuss it all, let's bring in the filmmakers behind Get Me Roger Stone, Morgan Peckma, Dylan Bank, and Dan DeMauro. Welcome, guys.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So, Morgan, let me start with you. You said the last time you spoke to Roger Stone a couple of weeks ago, he predicted that Paul Manafort's downfall, his arrest, his indictment was imminent, and he has now been proven right. I mean, how did he know that?
Well, Roger is one of Manafort's closest confidants. Roger has been helping Manafort manage the public relations crisis that he's gone through since leaving the Trump campaign last year. And so he certainly knows what Manafort's perspective is.
So, Morgan, well, all three of you guys, I always tell people, if you really want to understand the men surrounding the president, particularly during the campaign, your documentary is the one to watch. Because the thing about Roger Stone is he is unashamed, unembarrassed, completely naked and open about who and what he does, and that really what they are marketing is influence. They're influence peddlers, really to the highest degree. And so, with that as a background, are you surprised at all by the charges that we see being laid against Manafort?
Well, Manafort really went aggressively into his international work. Roger did it a little bit, but that was where the dirty trickster had his field day. Yanukovych, the Ukrainian president he was working for, had a zoo in his house, paid for by the taxpayers. That was the level of chicanery and tomfoolery they were doing over there.
Right.
So now a little bit of that's getting caught up in the American system, and mixing the two isn't proving too well for Manafort.
Yeah, so then no, you were not surprised, I guess?
Not really.
Yeah.
What did surprise me is that he didn't cover his tracks a little bit better. These guys are experts at jumping back and forth in the gray area of what's legal and what's illegal. And they've had a hand in moving the laws so far that you can get away with a great deal of legal chicanery. But what was okay in the Ukraine and what's okay in America don't exactly mix well.
It's not even a question of covering his tracks. You and I were talking about this yesterday. Why would you take such a high-profile position with the scrutiny, the level of scrutiny that is required to be the campaign chairman of a potential president of the United States, with all of the background checks that happen, the FBI, et cetera, if you knew that you had some things that were probably not on the up and up in your background? And Dylan, I want to play a piece of sound from Paul Manafort from the doc, and I want to get you to weigh in on the other side.
You are as connected to the insider game of what you've even said on record yourself, influence peddling, as anybody. How can you be the antidote or anything to help Trump when you seem to go against his main message?
Depends on who you talk to, if I'm part of the establishment or part of the anti-establishment.
So Manafort says it depends on who you ask, if he's establishment or anti-establishment. Does that speak to the fluid nature of his career?
I think so. I think he's always kind of been the shadow operator. But a lot of these men have a lot of contradictions, right? Like Trump, the billionaire who's the blue-collar guy, Manafort, who's the insider-outsider, and Roger Stone, who knows how to package an outsider. So I think that was kind of very representative of who he is. He's the shadow operator.
And Vladimir, that was such a great observation that you made about why would Manafort subject himself to this, right? You know, and it's pure hubris. Here, if he had just gone about, working overseas, this never would have been exposed. But he couldn't resist being in the limelight at the center of a presidential campaign, making the president. And so it was hubris that drew him into this. And now we're seeing what happens when you're hubristic.
One of the reasons these guys got as far as they got is because they're not just in it for the money. They're definitely in it for the money.
Yeah.
But they're in it because they love it. They wake up every day, how can I destroy my enemies? How can I make my candidate win?
That is very interesting because the perception that I got, particularly from watching the movie, is that they were strictly driven by money, that they just wanted to sort of make more and more and more of it. To when, and I don't know, but obviously at some point you have enough money, so something else is driving you, right?
That's right, Emery. You know, so Roger Stone says that he's happy about the work that he and Paul Manafort did representing brutal third world dictators because they made a lot of money. But it's not just about money for them, it's also about power. They're not trying to accomplish an ideological agenda, but what they want to do is to dominate the political arena, and they've done so consistently for decades.
Is he an honorable man?
Paul Manafort?
Yeah. Roger Stone.
I don't think so. I mean, I don't think anyone's accused Roger of being honorable before.
I don't think he would describe himself that way either.
He's remarkable.
Which is remarkable in this day and age, that used to be a person's calling card, your honor and your integrity. And to suggest that a political operative, somebody who has a hand in deciding America's future, depending on which candidates they decide to back, would not consider themselves honorable. And I perhaps would pose that same question to Paul Manafort and Mr. Gates. I mean, do you think that do they see themselves as honorable men?
I think they do believe that what they're doing is right. But I think that the conventional rules of what would constitute being honorable, they also feel like are naive.
But it sounds like it's all about money, which has nothing to do with honor whatsoever.
Part of what they're interested in is the high of election night, that thrill of it coming down to the numbers coming in and the next reports coming in and that, oh, I won, oh, I lost. That high has kept them going for years and years. Yeah. But as far as reputation goes, Ann Stone, Roger's first wife, told us a great story, which actually did not end up in the film, which is that Roger had been getting a lot of negative press, calling him a dirty trickster, a son of a bitch, and he was getting really depressed about it. And his wife said, Roger, you told me once that if you did your job right, your epitaph and your gravestone would be, here lies a real son of a bitch. And that perked him right up.
That perked him up.
That's his personality.
Oh my goodness. So Roger Stone was not surprised that Paul Manafort was indicted. Did he have any other predictions about some of the other people that we see surrounding the president?
Well, I mean, we can't speculate on that. I don't know exactly what Roger thinks, but certainly his MO has been to say there is no collusion, so there's nothing to worry about. And if you're arguing to him, well, Mueller's trying to get Paul Manafort on tax evasion and money laundering, so maybe he'll flip on Trump. Roger will say Paul Manafort's not going to lie. He would have to make something up because there is no collusion, and that remains their stance.
Okay.
What about the recent news? Roger's been in the news recently. He got banned from Twitter after some. And I remember, because we're all plugged into social media, given the realities of our job, I saw that burst of, I don't know what you want to call it, vitriol that came spewing out of his Twitter feed a couple of nights ago, and it was really bad. I mean, he called another news anchor excrement, and he, called Carl Bernstein a couple of names. What do you make of that? I mean, that again, it goes back to my question. I mean, you can be all in it for the game, you can be all in it for the high, the win, the loss. I mean, football players do the same thing, but this was really kind of I'd never seen anything like that before.
Well, there's certainly a self-destructive element of Roger's character where he just can't resist spewing invective. What was most frustrating for us is that after he got banned from his personal account, he took to this fake official account for our movie that has nothing to do with our movie and started
using that?
Started speaking under the rubric of being Get Me Roger Stone and saying, man. Oh, I'm talking from my documentaries account. Well, our documentary has nothing to do with him other than the fact that he was a subject.
That's. Can we talk a little bit about Podesta stepping away from his own firm as well? Did Roger Stone talk about that, or did he predict that he's probably the next person that would find himself in trouble?
Well, I think ever since all the way back during the campaign, that was already their spin on it, and people will say, oh, Roger Stone, Paul Manafort, you're going to jail. He'll be like, the only people going to jail are John and Tony Podesta.
Are they arch rivals?
I wouldn't say that, because Podesta actually worked with Manafort and he received some of this money to do lobbying in the United States for the Ukrainian president, which also wasn't registered under the Foreign Agents Act. So both Manafort and Podesta are kind of embroiled in this Ukrainian political lobbying scandal.
Oh, it's so swampy, right? What happened? I thought the
It's as
swamp
seedy as
was
it
getting
gets.
cleaned up.
Yeah, it's so interesting. But actually, Black Manafort and Stone was the first bipartisan lobbying firm in D.C. They had a Democratic partner so that they could triangulate every race and represent every single candidate in a presidential race. And so this idea of the Democrats working together with the Republicans, we like to believe there's a partisan divide, but really everybody's united in the lust for power.
It's a lot more like professional wrestling than they'd like us
I was
to be.
going to say, it reminds me a little bit of, it's sort of like the fictional character Gordon Gekko, where there isn't anything other than the winning and the losing, the zero-sum game. Either you win or you lose. You either make money or you don't. And it has nothing to do with America. It has nothing to do with our ideals. It has nothing to do with our Constitution. It has nothing to do with wanting to see the country and the people in it in a better place than they were perhaps 4 years ago. It only has to do with whether or not you win the game.
Roger started out as a pure ideologue. He himself calls his early days his Nazi Hitler youth because he believed hippies were destroying America, the Vietnam War was great, all drugs are evil, and he's genuinely changed over the years. He's pro-drug now, he marches in gay pride parades, but he never really switched teams. So he still will fight to the death for the Republican Party or occasionally the Libertarian Party if he's fighting himself for the Republican Party. But a lot of the ideology has gone by the wayside, and he's still left with just that bullish, I gotta win attitude and the skills to make it happen.
And Morgan Peckma, Dylan Bank, and Dan Dumaro, did I say it properly?
Yeah.
Get me Roger Stone. If you haven't seen it on Netflix, please do. It's a great movie.
Great to be here.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.